So one of the first things we have to do is work on all of the lies we believed that others told us, but more importantly, the lies that we told ourselves, and then start addressing them. One of the first ways that you address them is by starting with writing down what is your definition of forgiveness. And the reason I say that is because I can ask 10 different people what forgiveness means, and I'm going to get 10 different answers.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgens. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right, welcome to Coach Soul. Got a special guest with us, Jay. Jay, welcome to our show where we try to do transformation of the soul, so to speak. And you do carry that transformation. Talk to the audience here about introducing you, what it is that you do, and what's transformative for you.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate certainly your time. I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm called anything, it's an expert in failure. I think that through our failures, we learn the most wisdom. And I've had a lot of failures in life. And because of that, I have a lot of wisdom. But I actually started my field very quickly. Years ago, I had a very sudden family tragic death. And when I say sudden, I mean, it was my father. I was on the phone with him, laughing, joking around, telling jokes. And literally 4 days later, we're lowering his body into the ground. And about 3 days after that, I woke up with my first panic attack. And what's interesting is I've been working with people and couples a long time, and I've actually worked with a lot of people on panic attacks. But boy, was I ignorant because I never experienced a panic attack. Now, that's not to say that you can't be a good brain surgeon if you've never had a brain injury. I'm just saying there's no substitute for experience. And it wasn't until I had my first panic attack that I completely understood, whoa, okay, I get the gravity of this. Anyways, in doing the research of what my panic attack was all about, I discovered I had a lot of unhealed childhood trauma. And while working through that childhood trauma, it just led me on this roller coaster of a sequence of events to where it led me into trauma, PTSD, CPTSD, which ultimately led me into the field of betrayal trauma. I will say it kind of found me. I didn't find it, but all is well. It's a fascinating field. I went through the whole certification process to get certified as a betrayal trauma practitioner. And now about 98% of all of my clients are couples that are working through the process of trying to repair and rebuild after infidelity.
It's fascinating work. When you think about it, we get into our fields usually based upon experience, having gone through a divorce and it was not a good divorce, having what we call parental alienation syndrome back then. I get it. I'm in the depths right now doing some more research to get a book published to change parental alienation syndrome to disruptive parental attachment. That seems to be more fitting in trying to help people to understand that there are certain types of people who are going to alienate or disrupt the attachment with the other parent. And it's hurtful. It's another variety of trauma. And when you think about trauma, what you're dealing with, I think we talked a little bit off mic, and I think it's very important to kind of start here in regards to, I wrote a little blog. The quote that I use is, when a world is desperate to define you, it begins to whisper who you should be. Remember, identity is not discovered in their echo, but in the silence where your soul finally speaks. How does that resonate to us as human beings and we are dealt with trauma? How do we get lost in our identity, especially through trauma?
Yeah, very good question. I like your quote. First, let me just say this. As you know, we don't even have to experience any trauma to completely lose ourselves. As a matter of fact, well, speaking of trauma, one of the things that I tell people all the time is a lot of our suffering comes from the lies that we believed.
Mm.
And so, whether we have trauma or not, one of the things we have to do is really go from scratch, from our earliest memories, and write down the lies that we believe. Because a lot of our trauma, like I said, is due to the suffering that we have with simply the lies that we believed. And those lies could be anything like, well, I remember going into the house and my mother was always busy cooking, so she didn't want to hear anything I said. Well, that could be a break to your nervous system. And eventually, just like a cut of death by a thousand cuts, that can create over time some trauma. It very well could be, when I was 16 years old and I was cornered in the bathroom and sexually abused. And those lies that you believed, you're nothing, you're dirty, you're worthless, whatever. But I'm going to tell you something. More importantly, in my opinion, what we need to do is address the lies that we told ourselves. Because somebody can tell us something once, but we repeat it in our head hundreds of times. So if we go to our when we're younger, if we go to our father and our father says, you upset me, that's why I hit you, get away from me. Whatever message that tells us, and of course it goes through our filters. And of course, if we come from a dysfunctional, abusive, non-healthy childhood, a lot of our filters are wounded already. So that goes through our wounded filters. We get a message, and then for years and years and decades after that, we continually have that narration, that dialogue in our head. So one of the first things we have to do is work on all of the lies we believed that others told us, but more importantly, the lies that we told ourselves, and then start addressing them. One of the first ways that you address them is by starting with writing down what is your definition of forgiveness. And the reason I say that is because I can ask 10 different people what forgiveness means, and I'm going to get 10 different answers. What does forgiveness mean to you? Not using the term letting go and to forgive. And if you do use those terms, what's the process of doing that? But after you have the definition of forgiveness, then you start applying it to yourself first. I
Kind of,
forgive myself.
I want to kind of backtrack a little bit because I really believe that is a crux to situations that we find ourselves in, the lies that we tell ourselves. And I mean, the events happening, and as years go by, uh, how is someone to know whether that was a truth or a lie in the event that it happened?
Well, I think one of the ways that you uncover a truth or a lie is you strip away all emotion, all
Mm.
mood, all story that we find it. For example, listen, we've all been in relationships, you and I, and everybody who's
Yeah.
listening. How many times do we create false stories every day with the person we're with? For instance, how many, I asked you to take out the trash and you don't take out the trash, but yet if your mother called you, you take out her trash. Why? Because you don't respect me. Why don't you respect me? We give ourselves all these big long
Oh, for
stories.
sure.
We need to really write down what is fact, not story along with it, not emotion. What is the fact? And if I were in that situation, I would be like, the trash wasn't taken out. That's it. There's no story along with it. So one of the things that you do is you really got to sit down and just write what is the real raw, what is a fact, not all this other story that we attach to it. And that's very, very difficult because listen, stories keep us safe.
Right.
Stories feed our ego. And so that's like a natural default. So that's one of the ways to do it. But the other thing too is to really ask yourself, okay, listen, when my mother only told me or only gave me compliments when I brought home good grades, I believe the lie that I was only as good as my grade. I need to address that lie.
When you think about the deconstruction and trying to look at a variety of ways of taking this emotion out, some people feel like I'm already numb. I don't know how to identify, this emotion that I was or was not feeling in a moment. When you have these couples that are coming to you, and all of a sudden there's this sense of, I don't want to deal with their emotion. What do you say to these couples that have the difficulty in facing this emotion, but also confronting a lie that has or has not been told? What's a way that they can start working on identifying what's truth for them?
So I'm going to tell you this. it's another analogy is when you talk to people and they're like, well, I'm not political, I don't vote. And I'll say, well, listen, no judgment here at all. But you're basically telling your next door neighbor, you can tell me how to live because they're going to vote. They're going to vote for their needs. And then that person that gets in is going to make laws. So that's fine if you don't want to vote. But basically, you're giving up your right to live how you feel is best for you. So I back to your question. If you do not deal with your lies, your trauma, your grief, they're all very patient and they will deal with you. So that's fine if you don't want to dive into that pool. But then you can be a marionette to all the negative things that have affected you in life.
I take this question because I found it important. On your website, you say that relations can break you, but even broken crayons still color. And sometimes when we're believing in these lies, that these couples feel like I'm inadequate. They can't serve a purpose in a relationship, or you're too good for me. I don't know how you can love a person like me. How often do you hear those statements when you're working with couples?
Oh, listen, even if I don't hear those statements, I know that's what's ruminating. I'm going to tell you something. So I do premarital coaching and I'm also a wedding officiant. So I will, marry couples. And I'm going to tell you something. I can't tell you how many times, especially if somebody doesn't want marriage coaching, they just want to get married. And I'm not here to judge. I'm here to serve. I'll do whatever you want. But so many times I am in front of a couple and I'm thinking they are exchanging I do's and they have no idea who the I am is.
Hmm.
And what happens a lot of times when we come to the wedding table, we come with our Santa Claus bag of baggage. And what do we have in that baggage? The need for our spouse to help fix us. Little do we know, our partner's coming with the same bag, probably with more, expecting us to fix them. And next thing you know, we bring to the marriage table all these expectations, and we're broken and not healed. And here's where a lot of the marriage breakdown occurs. So I think one of the biggest thing to do is the more you know, the more you grow. And
Hmm.
you have to constantly get to know you. And what does that mean? That means this. You are not the same person you were today than you were 2 years ago. And you're not going to be the same person 2 years down the road than you are today. You have to continuously do some introspection, reflection, get to know who you are, build bridges to who you are, love and accept who you are. And this isn't easy work. Nothing about anything in life is fun, fair, or feels good, especially
Right.
trying to heal a broken relationship, whether it's with yourself or with somebody else. However, if not, all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure in future relationships and jading another human being in life. So you have to not only continually get to know who you are, but also if you're working on a relationship with somebody else, building the bridge to who they are. And I always say, especially in marriages or relationships, going back to my particular field, infidelity, I tell people, and you're not going to find this in any study or research, this is my own personal belief. I believe that when a person goes through infidelity, if they're experienced the horrific, life decimating, shattering experience of being cheated on, in my personal experience and opinion, I think what they're dealing with is about 40% of the trauma at hand, 40% of the current trauma at hand. But the 60% that makes the 100% that they're dealing with is what happened is they woke up that sleeping giant of all the childhood trauma that was never healed. And so now they're trying to fix a broken marriage with the tools that they were never given even at the age of 10. It's a very difficult journey and road.
And it's not something that you can fix overnight. It's
Lord knows.
we want a magic wand. We want to be able to do things. And in the book that I wrote on Mosaic Family, the blended family, I'm trying to get the name changed from blended to mosaic because it creates individuality, it creates boundaries, and so forth. And when you think about how we go from relationship to relationship is through attachment. How we were raised, we view our world in ways of attachment. And so when you think about what you shared on infidelity, my belief system is take a sabbatical from dating. relationship. If you get into a single, you find yourself single again, that's the time to really explore. Wait a minute, you're in a marriage now. Infidelity happened. I don't think everything is lost. So when it comes down to, well, my gosh, they betrayed me. I don't know how to trust again. What do you tell a male, female who has been cheated upon? They can trust again. And they say, well, my
Yeah.
bicker's broken.
Well, first of all, well, I would tell a male female the same thing as I would tell a female female or a male male is absolutely trust can be broken again, but it has to start from within. See, I'm going to tell you something. A lot of times, there's what's called betrayal blindness. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that term, but Jennifer Freed coined that term in
Okay.
the 90s. And betrayal blindness is actually a part of our nervous system. It's actually meant to help us keep safe. It really is. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a quick story, if you don't mind. We all remember the story of Little Red Riding Hood. She wanted to go see her grandmother. She wanted to go see her grandmother so much that she didn't really care there was this big bad wolf in the forest. She just had blinders on. She wants to go see her grandmother. So she bakes cakes and cookies and loaves of banana bread, and she's off to see her grandmother. And she knocks on her grandmother's door, and she doesn't hear anything at first. Something inside her said something's off. Maybe she couldn't pinpoint it. Maybe she didn't know exactly, but something inside of her was off. But you know what? She just ignored it. She just ignored it because she wants to see her grandmother. So she opens up the door. Grandma, Grandma, are you here? She doesn't hear her usual grandma's voice. Something inside her is saying, you need to look into this. You need to run. You need to walk away. You need to somehow stop, focus, address that. No, I want to see my grandmother. She's got blinders on. And this is oftentimes subconscious. And so she goes into the back bedroom. At this point, she knows it's not her grandmother. She says, Grandma, why do you have beady eyes, a long jaw, sharp?
Mm.
She knows it's not. But do you think she turns around? And no, because she desperately wants to see her grandmother. And then it's to her demise. She gets eaten. And so what happens a lot of times when D-Day comes, the day of discovery, that, you realize, oh my gosh, what was I thought possibly a possibility is now a definite, and your world kind of implodes. Now, not only are you dealing with your partner's betrayal, but now you're doing so being detached from yourself because
Mhm.
you did not respect your intuition that was knocking on your door for possibly months and years before this big D-Day came. See, I'll tell you, I don't know how many times I'm talking to somebody like, you know what? I saw lipstick in the glove compartment. I saw the hair on his seat. Or he'll say, if it's a male female couple, I saw her with her boss at Dunkin' Donuts having coffee. And I was just like, oh, you know what? She's so nice. She's giving him extra time. She's probably helping him in his marriage. Or, my husband's probably giving his coworker a ride home from work because he's so nice, whatever. Maybe something inside of us is putting off a little bit of an alarm, but betrayal blindness kicks in and wants to keep us safe. And the reason why is because if we attach to the truth, if we address the truth, then what happens is we feel in our body there's a bigger bomb that's going to go off, such as, okay, if I do confront my husband and I do find out he's having an affair, now what? Now I'm going to go through a big divorce. It's going to embarrass me. It's going to embarrass my family. I'm going to be financially ruined. I'm going to see my kids every other weekend. No, 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 I can't go there. I can't go there. So let me not think about it. And this all happens on a subconscious level. But like I said, what winds up happening is now after a big bomb goes off and you do decide you're going to try and rebuild and repair within your marriage, now you're doing so detached from yourself because you didn't honor your intuition for God only knows how long. So it's not an easy process. So that's why I say trust begins with you. You got to repair your own internal trust. Then you can start extending that outward.
You make it sound so easy.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes you and I know when working with couples, it becomes very challenging or difficult. They'll either throw each other underneath the bus or, well, one of the biggest ones that I've heard on a couple occasions is the fact that, well, he forced me, he coerced me into marriage. Are we not betraying ourselves in that moment too? And just projecting that we can't accept the truth, that we allowed ourselves to accept such thing, that it becomes a travesty. And so there's infidelity, not only within, the marriage. I think sometimes infidelity sets within us personally. We cheat on our
Oh
own
yeah.
self. You want to
Oh
talk
yeah.
about that?
Well, number one, let me just say this. I do have a tendency to believe at times we create what we fear the most.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, because I always say infidelity starts in childhood, it could be any, I mean, there's even studies now coming out where there's like a epigenetic component to infidelity, which I don't want to get into now because of whatever for various reasons. But when people are working on any after broken trust, one of the listen, as to what you just said, he forced me into this. I'm all about accountability and personal responsibility because well, for many reasons. But here's the deal. Even if that's the case, even if that were true, which is debatable, I would say, listen, sometimes we make the right decisions, and then other times we have to make our decisions right. So it still comes back to us. But absolutely, I think, again, what winds up happening is we have all these expectations for our spouse, significant other. And instead of doing the internal work, and let me be very, very, very clear, nobody has any responsibility in the choices their partner makes. None at all. Because this is what I tell partners that stray, because I hear it all the time. Well, I wouldn't have cheated if she gave me more sex. Well, I wouldn't have cheated if he was more, helpful around the house. Or I wouldn't. And this is what I tell people all the time. Listen, if you have a gun on your kitchen counter right now and nobody's in the kitchen, nobody's in danger. If you have a gun right now on the kitchen counter and it's loaded, but nobody's around it, nobody's in danger. The only danger is when somebody chooses to pick that gun up, aim, pull the trigger, fire, and shoot. That's when things get. So when I'm talking to somebody who stepped outside the relationship and they're trying to blame their partner, I'll say, listen, I don't care if your spouse gained 600 pounds, has one tooth, beat you upside the head every other Tuesday with a frying pan. You still had choices and you made the worst choice. And then I'll tell the other partner, the one who was on the other side, it's absolutely not your fault or responsibility because even if you jam-pack loaded that gun, it never would have hurt anyone if your partner didn't choose to pick it up and fire it. So people can have responsibility in the environment, but as far as choices, we can't. And we have to really break that down so people don't walk away feeling responsible that their spouses, cheated on them. I know I went on a tangent. I apologize.
No, you're fine. It just jogged the memory of mine where I question the motives. In other words, this couple had come into my session. She says, I'm getting more suspicious because certain events that happened in the first time that he cheated on me is happening again. And I happened to look at him and I said, what was it that caused you to make that choice to cheat? And I never heard of this one, but it shocked me because how I responded, because he said, my therapist told me I was going through a midlife crisis, and that's why I did what I did. And I said, that is the most BS of an answer because it's choice. We choose as small as it is. I call it the frog in the kettle approach. It's not like all of a sudden we go in and cheat. It's a slow process because of certain events that are taking place. I mean, we just, back in the month of July, we had the Coldplay scenario of the CEO and his HR. What is behind this betrayal that people cannot own the choices that they made that's hurt other people and themselves and being infidelity here?
Well, listen, who in the world, first of all, wants to own any responsibility on something? I mean, that's number one. Number two, something, I don't know if you ever heard of the Bermuda Triangle with infidelity, but usually, this is why I say infidelity starts in childhood, because usually what happens is there's something that happens in your childhood. And I want people to understand it doesn't have to be a big traumatic event. It could be that your father worked second shift And every day you looked outside and you saw your next door neighbor's friend's father tossing ball with him, and your father didn't toss ball with you. So it doesn't have to be like somebody was raped and molested and beaten severely black and blue. It doesn't necessarily have to be what happened to you. It could have been what didn't happen to you. It didn't necessarily have to be a knife in the heart when you were younger. It could have been death by 1,000 cuts. So, I mean, let's be very clear that it doesn't have to be necessarily this big traumatic event for you to have some childhood issues. But there was some prior issues, usually speaking, developmental trauma, developmental something, then something you're going through now currently in your relationship. Add on top of that your coping mechanisms or lack of, and then opportunity. So, for instance, you had some developmental trauma that maybe stifled development or whatever or developmental dysfunction, abuse, stress, overwhelm, anxiety, doesn't matter. I don't have to use the word trauma. Although the Latin word for trauma, I think, is wound. So, and we're all wounded, or we have all been wounded. And then you take, let's just say now, you're having a hard time with a midlife crisis, and you choose not to lean in and turn to your spouse and share certain intimate details of your struggles. But yet when you go to work, your coworkers like smiling at your jokes, laughing at your jokes, caressing your shoulder, saying, "You're so cute," whatever. So it's the perfect storm that happens. And then what happens is infidelity is from a tremendous amount of micro justifications. And then next thing you know, I also call it a trance. I think, how when there's like flies in the room and all of a sudden you turn on a light, all of a sudden the flies are like, all go to the light. I think, there's a lot of justifications that lead to, once that light gets turned on, now you can't help that trance. A lot of people go right to it, which is why a lot of people become very addicted to the affair. Now, not to the affair partner. I want to be careful because a lot of people struggle with, what did she have that I didn't? Or what did he have that I didn't? It's nothing about that whatsoever, because studies show that actually infidelity sex is far worse than marital sex, to be honest with you. So it's nothing to do with sex or whatever. It's how you allowed yourself to feel while you were in the affair. So one of my many goals is, how can you work on getting that feeling back within your marriage?
That's some great information. And, I hate to leave it on a cliffhanger, but that's a great way to end this side of the podcast and get into part 2, because it's valuable information that a lot of people I start blaming myself, because if I could have done more, they would have stayed. If I could have done this more, if I would have looked better. We get into that guilt shame that I think is very important that we need to look at as far as forgiveness. Why isn't our fault type thing? And so until next time, take care and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship or personal advice. Please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.